How is it possible that a team like Ferrari, with 2 champions behind the wheel and years of experience, falls loudly in a key weekend like Canada? And what is your own boss, Frédéric Vasseur, about this disaster? The 2025 Canada Grand Prix was not another race in the calendar. For Ferrari, he presented himself as a true test of fire, one of those dates marked red by Maranello engineers from the pre-season. Montreal is not only a classic layout where traction, braking and race pace test the full car package. The most serious thing was not the result itself. Finish 5th and 6th with Leclerc ahead of Hamilton is disappointing, yes. But the major problem was how that result was reached. There was no rhythm. There was no consistency. There was no clear direction from the wall. While teams like Mercedes and McLaren showed evolution, Ferrari seemed stagnant. The SF25, which in theory should represent the qualitative leap necessary to compete against McLaren and Red Bull, was erratic, sensitive to track conditions and above all, extremely dependent on the context. It was as if all the weekend were turning off fires instead of building a winning strategy. And the most worrying, the team fell again into errors that seemed overcome. The lack of preparation in practices, the absence of clear communication between engineers and pilots, and strategic doubts reappeared. As if the 2024 lesson had not learned. As if Ferrari were caught. For a team that had started the year with high morals after signing Lewis Hamilton, this weekend in Canada was a reality bath. It is not enough to have 2 great pilots. A promising preseason is not enough. In Formula 1, the margins are minimal and errors are paid with blood. And Ferrari in Montreal, bleeding for each of his mistakes. That accident, although apparently lower for the unreasonable eye, had devastating repercussions. The damage was not only broken suspension, front wing made. It was strategic. Ferrari lost the most important car of his test program. And even more, he lost the opportunity to accumulate essential data on the behavior of the SF25 in a complex and demanding circuit as Montreal. Because Leclerc not only lost the rest of the FP1, it was also out of the FP2. That meant losing the most important session of the weekend to simulate long batches, evaluate the wear of the compounds, and compare aerodynamic configurations in real conditions. Fred Vasseur made it clear at the later press conference. If I could repeat the weekend, I would choose not to have lost the FP2 with a car. That phrase contains a deep confession. In Formula 1, the preparation is half of the victory. Ferrari went to Sunday's race without knowing how his tires would behave in the race rhythm. No consistent references. Without knowing with certainty how the car would respond to temperature changes or asphalt evolution. In a word, they were blind. But the impact of the Leclerc accident went beyond the technical level. It affected the morale of the team. He broke confidence in an environment where each decision relies on data generated. And even more, he placed additional pressure on Lewis Hamilton's shoulders, who had to carry the responsibility for the entire collection of solo data. This unbalanced weekend planning and forced the team to improvise on the fly. And everyone in this sport knows that when a top-level team begins to improvise, it is because something has already come badly. Leclerc, meanwhile, was mentally affected. The Monegasco pilot is talented, but also emotionally vulnerable when things twist from the beginning. The fact of not having been able to participate in the FP2 not only left it uninformed, but also disoriented. In classification, and especially in the race, that was noticed. Strategic decisions became discussions. Mutual trust became fragile. And it all started with that impact against the wall. It wasn't just a piloting error. It was the first dominoes that fell, and that triggered Ferrari's operational collapse in the Canada Grand Prix. If there is a word that can define the strategic failure of Ferrari in Canada 2025, it is this: disconnection. Disconnection between data and decisions. Disconnection between the box's wall and the pilots. Disconnection between theory and execution. Because while other teams such as Mercedes and McLaren knew how to read the track signs since Friday, Ferrari fell into a pattern that has already caused ravages in previous years. Underestimate the real behavior of the tires and overvalue the predictive models. And the result was a strategic chaos that not only made them lose performance, but internal credibility. It all started in classification. While George Russell and Max Verstappen opted for the average tires, looking for a balance between traction and durability on a track with uncertain conditions, Ferrari insisted on an election that did not adapt to the evolutionary state of the asphalt or the behavior of the SF25. Vasseur later recognized it with a resigned tone. The main challenge is to understand the characteristics of the tires and select the correct ones for each phase of the weekend. A statement that sounds more than self-criticism than an excuse. Because in the current Formula 1, error in the classification compromises all Sunday. and Ferrari paid him caro. But the true friction point occurred in the race. The divergence of criteria between Charles Leclerc and its engineers became an open battle, transmitted by radio and visible track. Leclerc, despite Friday's accident, had managed to find a good rhythm with hard tires in his first stint. His reading was clear. If he could maintain that rhythm, a single-stop strategy was viable. It was risky, yes, but it had logic based on its sensations with the car and the situation on the track. From the wall, however, another order arrived. A second stop, more conservative but also more expensive in time. Ferrari did not trust his pilot's instinct. And that was another critical mistake. Leclerc, frustrated, explained it with serenity when getting out of the car. "I thought I had done a good job with the tires. I was quite sure that a stop would be better on my side." And he added something more disturbing: "We decided to do the opposite." That phrase is not just a technical comment. It is a statement of conflict. A sign that the pilot and the team are seeing two different races. Vasseur tried to soften the situation before the press, recognizing that perhaps they were too optimistic with the rhythm that the SF25 could sustain with hard tires. But the damage was already done, both on the track and in the relationship of trust that must exist between pilot and strategist. Leclerc's case was not isolated. Hamilton also had moments of tension with the wall, although without the same media visibility. The underlying problem is that Ferrari does not finish understanding the operational window of the Pirelli 2025 tires. And if you do not understand your tires, you cannot master a race. That is the most basic principle of modern motoring. The SF25 seems to have an extremely narrow performance window. It comes out of the ideal temperature range with ease and finds it again with difficulty. That complicates decision-making and leaves little room for aggressive strategies. However, the worst is not that. The worst thing is that, at the key moment, Ferrari hesitated. And in Formula One, doubt is losing. Unlike Leclerc, Hamilton had a cleaner weekend in terms of incidents. He did not crash, he did not lose practice sessions, he was not a victim of pilot errors. And yet, his performance was opaque, bland, without the spark that characterized his golden years in Mercedes. It ended sixth, behind his partner. Without attack rate, without real podium options. And this, coming from a pilot who usually blooms in adverse conditions. One of the most disconcerting moments was the incident with a marmot in Vuelta 13. Yes, a marmot. A completely unpredictable factor that ended up causing significant damage to its SF25. That contact, which might seem trivial, altered the aerodynamic behavior of the car, reducing the load and affecting its stability in rapid curves. In a car that was already unstable by design, that damage made it an even more difficult car to drive. And the most frustrating is that Hamilton did not even make a human error. He was literally victim of chance. But in Formula One, even fortuitous accidents have devastating consequences when the performance margin is so narrow. Beyond the incident, what was clear in Montreal is that Hamilton has not yet achieved total integration with Ferrari. Despite being in his third race with the team, the lack of synchrony in tactical decisions, in career management, in the way of communicating. In Mercedes, Hamilton operated with an ecosystem designed to measure. In Ferrari, he is still a guest. And that status of outsider was evident in Canada, where strategic decisions were taken with him more as an executor than as an active participant. And that, in the case of a pilot with his record and vision, is a flagrant waste of human resources. At the end of the Canada 2025 Grand Prix, Fred Vasseur did not choose the easy way. He did not sign only to the car. He did not blame the pilots exclusively. His diagnosis was deeper, more structural, more uncomfortable. Ferrari's problem is not, and this simply made it clear, the SF25. The real conflict is in the internal fabric of the team. In their routines, in their work culture, in the way in which the different departments communicate and act under pressure. The car is just the visible symptom of a more serious ailment. And that ailment, according to Vasseur, has a name: lack of operational cohesion. Since he assumed the leadership of the team, Vasseur has tried to restructure Ferrari under a more agile and decentralized model, similar to the one he met in his time in Alfa Romeo. But in Maranello, cultural inertia are hard to break. The Scuderia has historically been an environment where the hierarchy weighs, where decisions tend to concentrate, and where Italian media pressure distorts decision-making. In that context, building a modern, flexible team that knows how to respond in real time to the changing conditions of a Grand Prix is a titanic task. And Montreal exposed it mercilessly. Vasseur, after the race, spoke bluntly that the team had failed in the management of unforeseen events. That phrase contains a universe of shortcomings. Because in Formula One, unforeseen are no exceptions. They are the norm. A car that does not heat the tires well, a pilot who loses an entire session by accident, a climatic window that closes before expected. All of that is part of the day-to-day. The difference between a championship team and one that aspires without realizing is precisely how it responds to those unforeseen events. And Ferrari in Canada responded badly. With doubts. With reactive decisions instead of proactive. The SF25 has problems, yes. Its operational window is narrow, its aerodynamic sensitivity is high, and its behavior in low-speed curves is not yet optimized. But none of that is insurmountable. The insurmount, on the other hand, is the culture of "we will resolve it later," of the "let's continue as we are." And Vasseur knows it. That is why his diagnosis was not technical, but human. If Ferrari wants to be world champion again, it is not enough to have the right car. It needs a team that works as an integrated system, not as loose pieces that react on autopilot. What happened with Ferrari at the Canada Grand Prix cannot be considered a simple stroke. It was a call for attention. Leave me your perspective in the comments. I want to know if you also perceive that Ferrari is repeating patterns of the past, or if you see signs that this year can still be saved. Is there hope, or are we facing the prelude to another lost cycle? And if you are interested in these deep, technical and human analyses on the current Formula One, consider subscribing to the channel.